business, but what exactly is happening with the travel business? Well, it would appear people now are told to abandon plans to go abroad this year by Health Minister, as it rightly says, it's deemed the government's advice on this front descends into near chaos. Can anyone get to the bottom of it? Let's try with LBC's political editor Theo Marshall. Theo.
It's the travel hokey-cokey as confusion reigns in Westminster about whether you can go abroad this summer. We know the advice on red list countries like India, stay at home, but if you go and then come back, you'll have to quarantine in a hotel for 10 days. And green list countries like Portugal are fine, as we proved earlier in the week. You can visit, return and get straight back to normal life without having to self-isolate. However, there is huge amounts of confusion about amber list countries, which includes most of the EU, North America and the Caribbean. The rules state that if you have been to an amber list country, you must quarantine at home for 10 days when you get back. But on Monday, the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, answering a question from his predecessor, Jeremy Hunt, was adamant you should not be going on holiday to amber list countries.
So could I ask him for absolute clarity on the amber list? Should my constituents in Farnham, Godalming and Hazelmere, all of our constituents, go on holiday to countries on that amber list, even when it is no longer illegal?
The answer is no. The official government advice is very clear that people should not travel to amber or red list countries or territories. People should not travel to amber list countries for a holiday.
Fast forward to yesterday morning, Environment Secretary George Eustice was singing a different tune. You can go to amber list countries. You have to quarantine for 10 days when you get back.
We don't want to stop travel altogether, and the reason, as Matt Hancock set out, that we have the amber list is there will be reasons why people feel they need to travel, either to visit family or indeed to visit friends. They can travel to those countries, but they then have to observe quarantine when they return and have 2 tests after returning.
4 hours later, the Prime Minister's spokesman said Mr Eustice had got it wrong. The Prime Minister himself then weighed in.
I think it's very important for people to grasp what an amber list country is. It is not somewhere where you should be going on holiday. But let me be very clear about that. People need to understand that an amber list country is definitely not a green list country.
Now, with a reputation for grabbing the headlines with outlandish comments in the House of Lords, the Health Minister, Lord Bethell, then insisted we should not be going abroad at all this year to anywhere.
Travelling is dangerous. And that is why we tell people don't travel. And that is why when people do travel, we tell them to isolate. Travelling is dangerous. And that is not news to us or to the people who get on those planes in the first place. So my Lord's ultimate sanction here is we do ask people, particularly as we go into the summer, travelling is not for this year. Please stay in this country.
So that's the comments from Lord Bethell to conclude the Airwatch's report, which seems to have thrown yet more confusion into the whole picture. And it's worth just noting something that LBC was across yesterday, my colleague Ben Kentish, the extraordinary number of flights, continuing roughly at the average, it would have thought, for about more than 4 a day in the 3.5 weeks since India was moved to this red level, or red light, whatever you want to call it. So that, yes, you can do the maths as well as I can, that means more than 100. This is something that Ben Kentish discovered.
The concern is, as we've heard in recent days, that when they get to the airport, they mix in the queue with people who've just gone off the plane. They've had a lovely holiday in Portugal, which is on the green list. They don't need to quarantine. But we've heard stories of those sorts of passengers being very close for several hours with people who have just got off a plane from somewhere like India.
And the Daily Mail picked that up, and there's a photograph of one young woman arriving with her mask suitably making her way through Heathrow. She's come in from the US beside a rather frazzled-looking dad with a child in a pushchair, and they've come in from India, and the distance between them, or maybe just about social distancing, but remind you, one's amber, one's red. Paul Charles is CEO of the PC Agency, co-founder of the Save Our Summer campaign, and served as communications director for Virgin Atlantic. Okay, in the eyes of one of the Lords then, Paul, summer's off. Do you agree? Good morning.
Morning, Nick. No, it's not off at all. And in fact, the government's own advice is that travel is not illegal. They've issued the traffic light system because you can go to green countries especially. And I think people are intelligent enough to realise that if they do go to an amber country to visit family or fiancés, for example, then they know they've got to self-isolate and take numerous tests, perhaps onerous tests as well as costly tests when they come back. So I think the government needs to rearrange the letters and the word shambles and work out how
whichever way, it really doesn't matter, does it, for the joy that hopefully will come our way. We wish everybody involved good health and happiness. The secret boyfriend is in the US, which is apparently where Ms. Campbell lives now in New York. Now, news that has just broken within the last 10 minutes or so that won't be in the papers. You listen to LBC. It's the CPI, Consumer Price Index Inflation, and that's risen to 1.5% in April from 0.7 in March. Now, that is a lift. And these are figures from the Office for National Statistics. We'll work out exactly what lies behind that in around 10 minutes' time in our regular look at the world of finance. Kenny is in, sorry to have kept you waiting. You work in the travel industry. What precisely do you do then, Kenny? Good morning.
So, good morning. I work in travel insurance.
And how's your business?
It's been extremely slow, only over the past year, obviously. But obviously, with things starting to ramp up, there is quite a bit of confusion because the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office say you should not travel to amber countries, and they're diverting, which is also really confusing customers because they feel should not is not a do not. So that actually really causes a lot of confusion, and we have to go by the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office in that. So yeah, there needs to be a lot more clarity on this because it is confusing a lot of people. I think even we've been confused at times as well.
What advice do you actually give them? If someone was to present themselves in front of you and say, I'm going to pick up a country in Belgium, I need to go to Belgium, what would you say?
So we advise them to read the summaries for each individual country on the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office and go from there. And if this is essential travel, obviously it's one thing, but for leisure, that's a completely different story. We say to just obviously check.
Okay. And lastly, the degree of confusion. You work in the industry. What do you think would help from the government to try and clarify it, Ken?
I think it is one of those things where the government's trying not to be authoritarian by using words like should not, but you have to be very definitive. In some points it did say travel to amber lists for leisure are not allowed. And I think that should be really, really clear to amber or red countries. It should not be allowed unless essential travel.
Is there a big thirst for it, lastly?
There seems to be, yes. I think people are just desperate to get away now.
Yeah.
People they feel cabin fever, and I think everybody just wants to get away for a bit,
Oh, that right. Good luck in your industry. Simon called, of course, saying there's around 5 million of us. I'm pretty certain I have got something booked. I'd have to check, but I'm pretty certain she has. And I'm desperate, of course, to get some time away. And I know you're going to say, well, why can't you stay in the United Kingdom? Just go to Bethwelly and make sure you spend your pounds so that the local economies benefit. But sometimes it is nice to sit by the Med or the Atlantic or wherever one chooses and just really tune into a different sort of culture. But we'll return to that conversation in a moment. Now, a few moments ago, thank you, Kenny. A few moments ago, I told you, and we're looking at this in more detail, that someone who was very close to Boris Johnson, indeed, you could credit her with helping save the man's life, has decided she's off. Jenny McGee, the New Zealand nurse, saying we're not getting the respect and pay deserved, and I'm sick of it. We'll look at that in more detail in the next hour. But this, as someone else who was once rather close to the Prime Minister, Dominic Cummings, has said he's ready to release key documents on COVID decision-making in government when he appears in front of MPs next week as part of the inquiry into the handling of the pandemic. That will be box office stuff. If Rupert Murdoch could do it, I reckon he'd make it pay-per-view. It would be astonishing. John Rentoul is chief political commentator for The Independent. What is worrying Mr. Johnson and his allies, whoever he has left now? What will be worrying them the most, John? Good morning.
Well, that's a very interesting question. Dominic Cummings says he's got the only copy of a crucial historical document, which suggests that there's been some rather poor record keeping in the civil service, and it's the only copy and he's got it. But he doesn't say what it says, obviously, which suggests to me it can't be that explosive because the normal instinct in such circumstances is to tell what you know. Mm-hmm. And he has already said what he thinks. About the government's handling of the crisis. He was very much on the early lockdown side of the argument, he says, and he wants to criticise the Prime Minister for being too slow. So, if he's got any evidence of that, we would love to see it.
John, remind the listeners why there's such bad blood between the two men.
Well, because he fell out with the Prime Minister's fiancée, Carrie Simons. Essentially, I think that was the final straw, and had to leave Number 10. He was Boris's chief advisor until then, until November, had to leave. But they did, I think it was the Barnard Castle business where Dominic Cummings seemed to interpret the lockdown rules to suit himself. I think that put the strain on their relationship, and that was the beginning of the end. And there's a sense that Dominic Cummings wants to get his own back.
Well, he's already described the UK borders policy as a joke. He's also indicated that he's happy to stay, I think, for as long as MPs want me for that questioning. Next week, Boris Johnson will be studied with great concern, won't he?
Yes, I think so. I mean, it is interesting that all Dominic Cummings' criticisms happen to fit in with the common view of coronavirus, that our borders should have been closed, because that is what people think, even though the scientists didn't advise it most of the time. And also that Boris Johnson was too slow to order the lockdown in the first place, although he was actually advised not to lock down too early by the scientists. So really, Dominic Cummings is having an argument with some of the scientists. It's interesting, in his thread yesterday on Twitter, he actually aligned himself with Patrick Mullins, who was one of the scientists who was advising the Prime Minister to delay the lockdown. So it'll be very, I think Dominic Cummings is being treated as a sort of secular saint and a truth teller now, but I think there are inconsistencies in his argument.
As ever, good speaking with John. Thank you. John Rentoul is Chief Political Commentator for The Independent. Let's feature some of your tweets, texts and emails concerning foreign travel. Danny says amber list countries should be a no-go. The government needs to change the website advice and people get a full refund. Danny, I think, again, possibly and understandably, you think that all these folk want to travel for holidays. They don't. There's relatives they need to see. There's loved ones they need to see. There's partners that they, in some instances, I remember taking a call from a gentleman whose girlfriend is in Poland, and I don't think he's seen her for the thick end of a year and a half. In relationships, it is good to see people. So some of this, is not all Judith's charmers wish you were here going on holiday, I assure you. We'll come to more of your views on that. Also, a lot of you getting involved in the Met officer who is being investigated. We don't know if you're facing any action because she, in uniform, decided to get involved in a pro-Palestinian demonstration. It is wrong, wholly wrong, just as I would say it would be wrong for her to wave the Star of David, to start singing along. What's the next thing? If you're policing a football game, you start chanting with the Arsenal fans when they rock up at the Emirates. It's just ridiculous. We'll look at that in more detail. Also coming up after news, more on inflation from our markets commentator David Buick.
News just out, inflation has doubled in a month. I'm David Buick of Aquis Exchange. More about this in a few moments.
And more, of course, about the excavation at that cafe in concern of the Fred West case.
Police say Rose West might be questioned, with excavation work due to begin at a cafe in Gloucester. I'm LBC's Heather Cartwright with the latest.
Heather will report after this. Just turned 7:31. This is Breakfast with me, Nick Ferrari, and LBC, and the news is with Simon Conway.
The government has been accused of sending mixed messages about international travel. People who go to countries on the green list don't need to quarantine on return to Britain, but a health minister says travelling anywhere is dangerous. Israel is being encouraged by US President Joe Biden to wind down the military offensive in Gaza. Airstrikes over the last 9 days have killed more than 200 Palestinians, and 12 people have died in Israel as the Hamas militant group continues to fire rockets. New figures show UK inflation rose to 1.5% in April from 0.7% the month before. The Office for National Statistics says it was mostly down to household utility bills and clothing prices going up. And the weather, rain in the southwest of England clearing to leave a mix of sunshine and showers for many. Most western areas becoming dry and fine later, a high of 17 degrees.
LPC. Stay on stamp duty holiday with Galliard Homes and save up to £15,000. We've extended the stamp duty holiday on homes right across the capital until January the 1st, 2022. London apartments from just £200,000 that qualify for a help-to-buy mortgage with just a 5% deposit. All come fully furnished free of charge with ground rent and service charge paid for 1 year. Book to view virtually or by appointment by calling 0203 770 6300. That's 0203 770 6300 or visit galliardhomes.com. That's galliardhomes.com. Stamp duty holiday applies on the first £500,000 of any new purchase. Help to buy applies on units up to £600,000.
As restrictions continue to ease, it's great we can now meet indoors. up outside in the fresh air, where COVID-19 particles can be blown away. Let's take this next step safely. Hands, face, space, and fresh air.
If your dentures or loose and missing teeth make it hard to eat, or make you self-conscious about your smile, TDC Smile in a Day dental implants could be the solution for you.
I smile, I'm a lot more confident, I don't have to talk with my hand over my mouth. If I'd have known the outcome and how it would have changed me, I just wish I'd gone to TDC years ago.
Let TDC restore your teeth, your smile, and your confidence. Book your consultation. Visit smileinaday.co.uk or call TDC Holly Street on 0203 7334 986.
Hello, this is your bank. Impersonator. Luckily for me, not everyone can see through my deceit, and I'd like to keep it that way. That's why I don't want you to sign up to
Which Scam Alerts? Our free service that keeps you up to date with the latest scams. No wonder scammers don't want you to sign up. Visit which.co.uk/scamalerts.
Word in the woods is that 3 little pigs are looking to sell their homes quick. They seem to be in a spot of bother with a big bad wolf called Rick.
Come out, little piggies.
So they spoke to the friendly team at Property Rescue, who can offer a guaranteed sale in as little as 48 hours at a fair price and a cash advance if you need one. Fast forward to living happily ever after. Visit propertyrescue.co.uk. Property Rescue. Fast forward to sold.
Galliard Stamp Duty Holiday until the 1st of January 2022. GalliardHomes.com. Applies on the first £500,000 of any new purchase.
Nick Foley and Breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
7:35. Alison, I think you're next in line to talk about the problems as regards foreign travel. I'm stressing it's not. I appreciate for some of you it's holidays, but for others it's to see
it's pretty interesting because it's this question now of streaming, taking on Netflix, content, and this is the problem. It's got all things. One of the things it does have, of course, is the 26 James Bond films. Unlucky ITV, I think you're going to lose it, because if the deal goes through, that is part of the deal.
Okay, there goes Sunday afternoons. And just briefly, the Eurostar arriving at Platform 3 comes with quite a rescue package.
£250 million. We need it, otherwise the thing was dead. I mean, virtually no trade for 6 months at all. The French government has needed a little bit of bullying, but it's all gone through very smoothly. So 50 million is coming from shareholders, and the rest of it is going to be form of equity raised from loans from banks and guarantees and things of that nature. But we need to get the show back on the road.
Talking the early hours tomorrow morning, David Buick.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Talk with Alison in Hornchurch. Now, Alison, you were trying to get to Spain. Was this for business to see a loved one? Why are you trying to get there? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Yes, I was going to Spain because I've had a security breach on a property that we own now there. I had all of the documentation, etc. Took it all to the airport, along with proof of ownership of the property. Got through security, got through a police stop.
Sorry, this is in Spain. This isn't the UK you're talking about.
No, this is from the UK. Sorry, I wasn't explaining myself.
No, don't worry.
This is at the airport first thing on Monday morning.
Right. So you hadn't boarded the plane. I'm terribly sorry. I'm being a bit slow. So you're still on the UK. Okay. Right. So you're making your way to the plane. What happens next?
So when I got to the boarding gate with my boarding pass, I was refused to board.
By the young man or woman who was doing the process of the
lady who was doing boarding onto the airplane.
And the reason given she gave?
I didn't have adequate reason to fly.
Did you have documentation showing you're a property owner?
Yeah, everything.
So obviously you then appealed to her boss, her manager.
She was the boss. She was the manager. And because I haven't got residency in Spain, or there is unfortunately people are in hospital out there, adequate proof of hospitalisation, these are probably the only reasons you can actually get out there.
Oh my God.
Or for exceptional reasons.
So you just had to give up?
Yeah, I then wrote to, actually, which really made me quite amusing, was I then was escorted back out through to the departure where I started, to then go to another airline to then be told my documentation was okay. Unfortunately, I didn't have an airplane, so I then went off to Stansted Airport, and I had the same, unfortunately, I actually thought it was the person I was seeing, but actually this is general wrong. I then wrote to the Spanish consulate, explaining what's gone on with my property, who had written back to me directly, advising that I have not got a reason to travel to Spain.
So are you owning the property there?
I own the property.
And someone's trying to break in or something?
We've had a security problem there for a few weeks now because our alarm system's failed. And Spanish law, Spanish law, there's also, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, there has become quite a bad squatting rate, which you have to prove that they gain access to your property within 48 hours. Otherwise, they become sitting tenants, and there is a lot of problems in order to evict them.
But lastly, I thought if you could show that you were a property owner and you wanted to either rent or sell your house overseas, that you were allowed to go.
No, that was actually, this is where I think the confusion is the government website. They're stating on there, previously you had to complete a declaration, which is, if you was looking to buy, sell, rent, your property, you're allowed to go. The rules haven't, in fact, got tighter.
Oh, Alison, I'm sorry, and I'll listen to that. I suppose you'll have to try again, but my goodness, if the consulate says there's not a lot you can do. serial killer Fred West have found what are called 6 voids in the building. Details now from LBC's reporter Heather Cartwright, who's been covering this story. Heather.
Yes, so we have had the confirmation now that police are going to start excavating at the Clean Plate Cafe in Gloucester. Now, it's thought that Mary Bastone, the suspected victim of Fred West, as you said, could be buried there. Now, that work is due to start from today. However, the force have also not ruled out that they may question Rose West as part of their investigation. Now, Fred West committed suicide in prison in 1995. However, Rose is serving a life sentence for her part in the murder of 10 young women and girls. Officers have said that it is an obvious line of inquiry to speak to her. Now, Mary Bastone went missing in 1968, aged just 15, which is understood to be before Fred and Rose West had met. There was speculation that they had covered up how early on they were actually involved. Police interviews, Fred West still always denied knowing anything about Mary, but he has long been implicated in the disappearance and possible deaths. Now, this isn't the first time there have been calls for police to search that building for Mary. She worked there as a waitress, and Fred West was a regular around that time. There is speculation as well that he might have done some work on the basement there. In 2012, a petition was started calling on Gloucestershire police to search there for Mary. Now, I asked DCI John Turner, he's the officer leading this investigation, why no action was taken around that time to excavate the